Are you stuck feeling pretty okay about your work or your life, but not really deeply fulfilled because you are scared of giving up something you're pretty good at for the chance to step into your zone of genius and really, really thrive? I encountered this question in a book that I first listened to and then read last year called The Big Leap. And I have to tell you, I read a lot of books. Only a handful of them do I read many, many times over. And this was one of them. And when I encountered this question, my first reaction was just to skip right past it because, well, no, I'm fine. And then it just stuck with me. And as I thought about it, I found it very uncomfortable. The reason I found it uncomfortable is because my answer was yes. I'd gotten really comfortable doing stuff that I'm pretty good at, but I've always felt this feeling like I have more to contribute, like there's something more to give. But I've sort of had this fear of even thinking about what that might be because I recognize it would involve expanding into completely new ways. The book that I'm talking about is called The Big Leap, and it's by this incredible author and transformational thinker named Gay Hendricks. And it had such an impact on me and everyone I told it about, which I think every single talk I've given in the past 6 months, I've mentioned it, that I reached out and asked if he would join me. And I am so thrilled that he's joining me for this conversation on the podcast. Um, Gay is a best-selling author of The Big Leap and together with his wife of many other books, including Conscious Loving, At the Speed of Life, and Five Wishes. He's had a really extensive career being an executive coach to top leaders at companies like Dell, Hewlett Packard, Motorola. He's appeared on more than 500 TV and radio shows, including Oprah, CNN, 48 Hours, and many others. And I could read a lot more about his accomplishments, but I'd rather dive in and learn from his wisdom. Gay, welcome to the Reinventability Podcast. I am so grateful you're here.
Thank you so much. I was very pleased as I was listening to all that. I says, gosh, I've been very busy, haven't I?
You have been very busy. That is true. Gay, I want to jump right into it. And before we talk about the zone of genius, I want to talk about the first core theme, the big problem that you introduce in your book. That also, I have to tell you, I was on a walk. I live in Boston, through the Boston Public Garden. And when you started talking about the upper limit problem, I stopped. I literally stopped there, kind of listening. So, what is this upper limit problem that so many of us have?
Well, first of all, your mention of the public garden brought up a memory of walking my daughter there when she was little and we lived near Boston, taking her on many walks on that in that garden and reading her Make Way for Ducklings many
That's
times.
right.
So I'm intimately familiar with the Boston Public Garden. Yes, the upper limit problem is something that I first noticed in myself, and then I started looking for it and checking with other people. The upper limit problem is our human tendency to knock ourselves back down when we've exceeded our previously agreed upon threshold of how much love or money or good things in general we can receive. So the upper limit problem are the things that keep that in place. So it becomes a glass ceiling that we bump up against and don't even know we're having it, because the upper limit problem, unfortunately, occurs way below the surface. And you have to be willing to take a dive into yourself in order to really uncover. And it's not a difficult dive. There's nothing to fear there. It's just that most of us, I would say, at least in this culture where people watch a lot of TV and are focused on the outside a lot and look at the internet and all that, is that many people, and also advertising leads them to believe that the solution is out there rather than in here. And so anytime, night or day, you can turn on one of the news shows, especially those that are skewed to the 50 and over set, and see a long list of television commercials about different ills and the miraculous new solutions to them. And all those things are fine things, but we need to balance that out with the ability to tune inside. Because I get people in here all the time, a 60-year-old person who can run a corporation with 100,000 people in it but can't tell me where in his body he feels fear, or can't
Mm.
tell me where in his body he feels sadness, or at first couldn't even tell me he's ever felt sadness. So, but of course we do. We're all the same. We have the same wiring inside. And for a million years, our bodies have been tuning us up to be feeling machines. And, it equips us for lots of points on the bottom of our foot that are for pain and other parts of our body, but it also puts fear in our bellies to take us to have us pause for a moment and think things over before we plunge into something. Or on the other hand, it teaches us to get the heck out of there. So that's where fight or flight comes from. But it also, inside our bodies, are messages like sadness and anger and I mentioned fear and sexual feelings and all of the things that are like a symphony playing constantly in the background. So we have to get good at going inside to really unhook the upper limit problem. Particularly, all upper limit problems are rooted in fear. And
Mm.
so if you want to really clear up your upper limits problem, you need to get on a conversational, easygoing basis with fear.
So can we, I want to dive deeper into this, and I want to share with you, Gay, since I have you here, I'll use myself as an example. One of the things I started to think about when I was reading your book, I was started and answering some of the reflection question going inside. I was thinking about, I came to the United States as a refugee with my parents. We grew up in the former Soviet Union, and I came here as a refugee when I was 13 years old. And, we came with nothing, no money. I didn't speak English. We had a few suitcases, the classic, like refugee. We lived on food stamps and welfare. And I have worked very hard. I built a very successful career and learned to speak English, obviously, and took care of my family. But I'd always, I think, had this thing. And this was one of the upper limit problems that I started to realize as I went within. I've always had this fear of running out of money, regardless of the fact when I was a big finance executive, being the breadwinner for my family, able to take care of more money than I could have imagined when I was 13 and a refugee. But I started to think about what was this fear coming from, right? Other than just the story. And so I'd love for him just sharing this in the interest of openness. And I think having that fear has prevented me from expanding in some ways. So I'd love for you to talk about, maybe offer some questions we can ask ourselves,
Mhm.
or how do we get to the root of it? And then, of course, how do we get rid of it? How do we make the big
Yes,
leap?
yes. Well, here is the simple truth of it. The first time you have your first conscious wake up thought, whether it's at 37 or 77 or 17, the moment you say, I wonder if the thoughts and feelings I have inside that I don't know about are influencing the outside circumstances of my life. That's a wake up thought. And you've had that thought, and I've had that thought, and many of the people listening or watching this have had that thought. That's a moment of conscious awareness, kind of waking up out of the fog of your programming. And so, another truth about it is the moment you have that first wake up thought, you need to be willing to do 3 generations at least of catch up work. And that is feeling the feelings that were there when your grandparents. See, because you and I were both eggs inside our mother when she was a fetus inside her mother. And so if you think of fear as a vibrational kind of thing, you can see that in one form or the other, you and I were at the influence of things that were going on when our grandparents were doing what they were doing. In my grandmother's case, they were carving a home out of the jungle in Florida. And my grandmother actually had shot at a Native American that was trying to break into their house that was living in the forest because they were on his territory. And so God bless them for the rigors that they went through. My mother didn't even have indoor toilet, I think, and she was in her teens. And so And I imagine, your grandparents must be at least that.
Yeah.
Yeah. To make them want or make people want to pick up and go to a different country.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happened in my lineage too. I'm a refugee also because my grandmother had been raised to be in her lineage, which was the grand dame of a southern plantation, and which had slaves on it, and they were the wealthy people in that county. They kind of ran things, and suddenly they got on the losing side of the Civil War, and she was penniless
Mm.
and had to marry somebody way, way, way below her station in life. And so fortunately he adapted to it, but golly, can only imagine the amount of inner toil that must have taken to craft
Mm.
a new being out of that. So blessings to your parents and grandparents and to you for coming through that. I've had many, many thoughts about that. When I was just preschool, I spent most of my time at my grandmother's house next door to my mother's house. And my grandmother was a very loving. She's why I'm here, basically. And she's the most wonderful human being, other than my wife, Katie, that I've ever run into contact with. And uh, I was so lucky to have her next door. And my mother was kind of at the opposite end, very tough, cigarette smoking, coffee drinking, newspaper reporter. She wanted to have one son, and unfortunately, that was my older brother. And so I came along at a very inconvenient time in her life. And so, anyway, I spent time at my grandmother's house. And one time I opened a chest that was under a bed in a room that we didn't go into very much. It was a big house. And I discovered millions of dollars of money in there. And I remember going to my grandmother and saying, wow, look at what this is. And she says, oh, that's the old money. It's not worth anything anymore. And even I could feel a tear coming to my eye because I saw the tears coming to her eyes when she thought about the days that were. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
nowadays there's a lot to find fault with them, but it was her way of life, and she didn't
Yeah.
know any other.
Yeah.
So blessings to
That
all the
makes sense,
people in our
Gay.
lineage.
You started talking that we have to, in order to recognize and, eliminate our limit problem, upper limit problem, we have to go back, right? And as you're talking, I'm thinking about my mom, my grandma, even my great grandma.
We don't have to go back. Erase that word from your
Okay,
memory bank,
great.
and you need to go in
Go
because
within.
it's not anything in the past. It's actually a living entity in your
Hmm.
own body. And that's a huge discovery in itself that it's an inside job because you were there. I mean,
That's such a
literally,
great point.
you were there in your grandmother's life, and so like it or not. Um, but the easy way is to just say, "Oh, okay, I get that," and now just, wow, what is that? And like when I go into it, I feel these depths of fear that I don't have any reference to in my own life. My grandmother, gosh, she carried this big black purse. And I ascribed wonders to that purse because in it, she carried like thousands of dollars of money, real money, the good money, the new money.
Yes.
And and because she had this deathly fear of going to nothing. And not only that, she had bonds, government bonds in this big thing. And she carried it with her everywhere, like it was her bag to go to the store with. She never let that thing out of her sight. At one time, until my grandfather talked her out of it, she used to carry a 38 revolver in there with everything else. That's what
Wow.
she walked around with. Now, you got to say this is 1905,
Yes.
1910. There are still Native Americans in the woods and things like that. So it was a very different world. And not to speak of the alligators, the pythons, the rattlesnakes, and all that they had to deal with. That even I had to deal with when I was a kid because I grew up on the same property that had been in my family for many generations. And um, anyway, so we're not going backwards. We're going down and into ourselves. And the magic discovery here. Uh, should I pronounce your name Natalie in the old fashioned or Natalie?
Natalie, but
Natalie.
Natalie is great. Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure about that because of the Russian heritage. Like I have a
Well, my
friend
official
called,
Russian name is Natalia, but my parents
I,
only use that when they're very unhappy with me. So if I make you unhappy, Gay, you're then you make a stern face and you go Natalia. Whenever I heard that from my parents, I knew I messed something up.
oh, yeah. Well, let me give you a reframe on that. One of my friends just had a new baby for a year ago. Now she's one, just turned one. But her name is Natalia. They've named her Natalia because of the beautiful music of the name. And she is the most divine baby you've ever seen. So that's a complete reframe for you if you so choose to
I love it.
enjoy it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So you
So
were saying the real magic.
the real magic is that once you go down through the layers of old anger and old anguish, sorrow, old fears, old sexual attractions you've had that you had to put away, all of these things that are things that have come and gone in your life because of your history. Okay, that's a whole bunch of things, like the things you're scared about or the things you're sad about, your first love leaving you or dying. Those kinds of things are part of your history. They wouldn't be there because, except for how you lived your life. There's this whole other thing beyond, behind, and woven into all that that I call pure consciousness.
Mm.
That you've got it, I've got it, everybody gets it by virtue of being human. And maybe other species have it too, but I don't know. We don't talk. So, but we have it for sure because I can feel it this very second. And I had my first moment of awakening. It was actually 1969. So my math skills stalled out at about the fourth grade. How many years ago is that? Would
Oh,
that
it's
be?
just a few years ago, Gay.
Okay, it's 50. No, I want to get this exact. It's 55 years ago.
5.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I had this big wake up moment. If you look at me now, you wouldn't recognize what I looked like on that wake up moment. Because if you look at me now, I'm a 6 foot tall guy, I'm 185. I'm athletic, because I do various things in sports and lift weights and all that kind of good stuff. And yet, if you'd seen me the day I had my wake up, I smoked 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I was in a very toxic relationship. I weighed more than 300 pounds. I was still 6 feet tall, but 300 pounds means I weighed 120 pounds or so more than I weigh now. So I was in this crappy job that I hated. I had no money. I couldn't even get out of the relationship because I didn't have enough money to find another room to rent. So anyway, it was desperation time for me. And I had this wake up moment of realizing, oh, I can understand how I've created my life with this kind of misery. I grew up in the presence of a lot of addiction, so it would stand to reason that I would fall in love with somebody who had addictions and then spend my energy trying to make them go straight. You know, that was part of my lifestyle at the time. In fact, I can't even confess to curing it the first time I realized it because I ended up creating another relationship that was very similar. Fortunately, it only lasted a year though before I woke up to that. And Katie and I just celebrated our 44th anniversary of the day we met back in 1980.
Amazing.
So
Congratulations.
it is possible, friends and neighbors, for you to have some really desperately awful relationships early on and strike gold when you're in your 20s or 30s. That's what I did. So that's what's available to us if we're willing to own who we really are, is that we are this pure consciousness being
Mm.
that's got this shimmering background of light behind everything we do. But it gets drowned out by getting involved with trying to solve the problems that are right there on the surface. And here's another problem, too. Whoa. That we all have to contend with. A very smart guy named Epictetus 2,000 years ago figured it out, and his students wrote down everything he said. He didn't like to write himself, but he spoke and people wrote it down. And it was humankind's first self-help book. But the first line of it says, "The secret of happiness is knowing that there are some things you can control and some things you cannot control. And focus on the things you can control. Take your attention away from the things you cannot control." That's simple. When I first figured that out, I didn't figure it out from Epictetus. I discovered him later. I figured it out some other way, but anyway, it was years before I discovered that Epictetus had figured it out 2,000 years ago. Well, I realized that 90% of the stuff that troubled me in my mind were things that I couldn't do anything about. There was nothing, there was no change, there was nothing I could do to change it. That was a huge realization, because the moment we shift from getting our minds caught up in all that stuff to focusing on, okay, what can I do in this moment to make my dreams come true? Or what can I do in this moment to have ease and flow with my relationship with my mother or cousin or whatever the issue is? So we shift from that moment, from focusing on something that you cannot control, that's driving you nuts, that's making you feel like you're spinning your wheels in a ditch, that's keeping you locked in anxiety. And the moment you say, oh, I can't control that, let me focus on something that I actually can make a difference in. So that's a huge moment in life. The big leap, in a way, depends on being able to execute that, because what you have to do is be willing to catch yourself doing something and then look quickly inside to see the source of it. So let me give you the quick map. Am I
Let's
going
do
on
it.
too long here? May I continue to
No, it's
ramble?
perfect, Gay. This is great
Okay, good.
wisdom. Yes, let's do the map.
Okay, good. Well, what happens is we have a couple of fundamental, problematic, unconscious beliefs that get a grip on us. And I've worked with rock stars and presidential candidates and everybody you can think of in corporation, blah, blah, blah. And even highly successful people are still dragging around a version of this problem which occurred before they walked into kindergarten. They had it established in their bodies, and we do too before we go into kindergarten. Okay? It's just something we soak up. Here's the unconscious belief, is that for some reason, I don't deserve all of the good things of life. Okay, and the technicalities are because of the way I look, or because of the history I've had, or because of bad things I've done, or because I'm the wrong ethnicity or skin color or whatever. Whatever the condition is, using that, keeping yourself hostage to that version of yourself with a limiting belief that says, I can go no further than this. Now, here's the interesting thing. You can lift the lid off in the money area and still have it be a problem in the love area.
Yes.
Or conversely, you could have the greatest relationship, but be a total money screw up because you're still in the grip of one or the other of those old limiting beliefs. So first of all, let's just detach that, like I'm unplugging a what I call it, a USB drive from your computer and plugging a new one in that says it is okay for you and every other human on earth to enjoy all the good things of life. It's okay to love as much as you possibly can. And it's okay to have as much money as you want and want to focus on. It's okay to have good things in life and enjoy them immensely. Your challenge in life is to open up to be a bigger receiver for the good things in life. So focus there. Focus on the question of, how could I receive more money? How could I receive more money? Notice that I'm not saying, what can I get busy with to earn more money? I'm saying, what could I be the receiver of? What could I effortlessly receive more of? Here's the Here's the thing, Natalie. Human beings are extremely good at doing,
Yes.
very not so good at being. So we need to balance out. Life is a breathing process of out breath, in breath, drinking in the good things of life and then expressing the good things of life. That's what life at its very best is a breathing process of breathing in love and breathing out love, breathing in abundance and breathing out abundance. Just being in the process of that full, easygoing breath of life.
What a
Attunement to
beautiful way to
everything.
put that. What a
Mm,
beautiful way to put that. As you're talking, Gay, I think in your book, I remember listening to this part. I'm sure it's in the written version as well. There is I think you call it a success mantra that you introduced to help reprogram this I don't deserve, I'm not good enough for. And I just want to, as a good student, I want to report to you that it's something I've been kind of living with for the last year or so since I learned it. And my version of it, you introduced it and you said we can add a little bit. So my version is that I expand in love, creativity, and abundance, and I inspire everyone around me to do the same.
yes, that's
And
such a
it's,
such a beautiful root concept to organize your life around.
yes. And I love how, I just want to tell you that when I practice it, usually in the morning, when I do my morning meditation, there is this immediate shift, not in any external condition, but I think as I'm listening to you, it's like things open in the receivership side. And I love that you touched on that because, I do a lot of work with incredibly impressive people, like people you worked with, leaders, executives, entrepreneurs. And yes, there's this sense that many have that either they don't deserve all the more good stuff or they're not good enough. And there's this feeling, you just touched on it, that if there is more, then I have to work harder. I have to do
Mhm.
more. I burnt out 8 years ago completely because I was living like that, because that's what I grew up with. I have a very loving family, but the way that I grew up with is if you don't climb up that wall or walk through it or knock it down, nothing is going to come to you. And
Yeah.
so I just want to share that just saying that mantra, I think opens us up to receive. And I wonder, for me, this really connects to how you talk about what it means to be in the genius zone, because that touches on, you know, I'm not good enough, right? I wrote my first book 6 years ago after I went through this very difficult burnout experience. And I've written books since then. And still, I have this sense, "Oh, I'm not good enough to be a hugely selling author." Like, oh, my idea, the story I tell myself, Gay, is this voice comes up and it's like, oh, the things you have to share, everybody already knows this. It's not very
Mhm.
unique, right?
Mhm.
Again, it's, as you're saying, it's that story that's been acquired. So I wonder if you would talk a little bit about this concept of what does it mean to be in our genius zone and how that connects.
Yes, the universal or ultimate success mantra that I have in The Big Leap that you just quoted from was, first of all, the result of me sitting one afternoon wondering, what is my life purpose? What am I really
Mm,
here for? I was in my 30s at the time, and I'd already done stuff. I'd already written a book and been on TV and a bunch of stuff like that. And I was already a university professor, which had been my big goal for my life. And so all my dreams had come true. And yet there was still this yearning part of me. And I realized I didn't have one thing that I could orient my life around. What was my life really about? And so I sat down and I decided I'm not going to get up until I figured out my life purpose. And so I sat there for about an hour. What's the most sublime thought that would express the most sublime thing in my life? And when I came up with it, it's this experience of being open or opening to more love or more money or more success or more creativity. That experience of opening, just like you might open your hands or open your arms to a hug, that kind of opening. And by doing that inside, you open yourself to everything, because opening to anything is opening to everything. And so you have that experience of opening, and then, but that's not complete. The out breath is to express that genius. So not only being open to the fullness of your own abundance and your own creativity and your own ability to feel love, but to have that be an exemplar for other people, to have other people model that and be willing to share that in one way or the other. You don't have to share all of it, but sharing that in a satisfying way. Open your heart to giving it all away. Because here's the great paradox of breathing. Only by giving away a full out breath and making yourself empty can you welcome in the next in breath. And so think of your life as this incredible breathing being. It's like the wonderful William Wordsworth poem of a couple of hundred years ago. And now I regard with eye supreme the very pulse of the machine, a being breathing thoughtful breath, a traveler between life and death.
Mm.
Isn't that a beautiful way
That's so
to find
beautiful.
out who you are? A traveler between life and death, as our breath is with every single of the 20,000 breaths a day we take.
What a
So,
beautiful, this metaphor, Gay, of this, of our life being this in and out breath, and that, we inhale what we receive, right? And opening up to be able to receive. And then we exhale, and that's expressing our unique abilities, our gifts, our who we are. Um, so talk a little bit about how does one figure out what that is? Like, how do we figure out what our zone of genius is? Actually, first of all, what is the zone of genius? And how do we figure out what that is? A lot of people that I work with or that I connect with, they say, I don't know, Natalie, I don't know what my unique abilities are. So I'd love for you to talk about what the zone of genius is and how do we figure out what ours is?
yeah, so that's where most of us start, is not knowing. And the first thing I would say about that is that your genius zone is when you're doing what you most love to do and making your biggest contribution to other people at the same time. Like, you should have seen my grandmother make soup. My grandmother's cooking, even if she hadn't done anything else with her life, I mean, she could make 20 people around Thanksgiving table almost cry when it came time to dessert. She had these dessert pies she would make. And the way she cooked fried chicken and things like that, it was just unbelievable. And the way she would do it is she would do it like a symphony, a little thing here, a little thing there, a little thing there, but very seldom tasted it, but just, in fact, I read one time that the great chef Escoffier almost never tasted the food he
Huh,
was cooking. Sniff, sniff, sniff.
huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, yeah. And so that was my grandmother. And so it doesn't matter. One of my great mentors, Abraham Maslow, said it really doesn't matter if you're making a genius soup for 5 people or composing a genius symphony that 1 million people will ultimately hear. We draw on the same capacity in ourselves. And uh, Dr. Maslow said it himself toward the end of his life. He said self-esteem, he remember his hierarchy of needs and all of that.
Yes.
And self-esteem was at the top for a long time. And then self-actualization and transcendence became the higher elements of the pyramid, not just self-esteem, but also to transcend that into the unknown of ourselves. Because as our kind scientists want to point out, we only use a small segment of our brain. If you can put a needle into vast areas in our brain and it doesn't make us blink. And so there's a lot of territory up there as yet to be occupied.
I love that I absolutely love work and been really impacted by Maslow's work. And I love that reflection. And I love the way you articulated, Gay, the zone of genius, because it's very specific. And I always love when, and really appreciate about that in your work, because it's not just a concept, right? Like as soon as you said it, doing something that you love and you impact, have the greatest impact. And by the way, I just want to connect with you. My grandmother, Mira, who came to the US, my grandparents, my mom's parents came to the US with us and lived quite a long time. I'm very lucky. My grandma died 6 years ago, my grandpa only 3, but she was a similar artist in the kitchen, Gay. My grandma, I mean, we had the tiniest kitchen in their apartment in Russia, like the size of this table that my microphone is on, and she made masterpieces in there. I don't know from what or how. So, and again, like my greatest memories are eating her food. What an impact that is. So I love that definition of it. Um, what are, and I think it's, thinking about the purpose of life. I love that you sat down and said, I'm not moving until I come up with it. My process has taken quite a bit longer, but I feel like that is the entire purpose, right? Is to like uncover our unique abilities and share them with others. It feels like that's why we're here. So what do you say to someone who's listening to this and they're like, I don't know, my impact feels insignificant. I don't know. I had a
Mhm.
woman the other day, a leader that I work with, and she said, I don't know. I don't know what my unique ability is. I guess I'm a good listener and I guess my friends benefit, but what does that matter? Right. So, what do you say to someone who is doing that fantastic job diminishing their
Yes.
impact and gifts?
Well, I would say have the courage, the bravery, the boldness to sit down for 10 minutes and exclusively focus on what your genius is. Like here, I'll give you a $25,000 gift. Our 1 day program for business executives costs that. And so the first thing they do is we have them go in a room by themselves for 10 minutes and do only two things. One is to simply phrase the question, what do I most love to do? And then take 3 easy breaths and then ask the question once again. So in the course of doing that, they have a couple of dozen opportunities to say, oh, that we asked them to hum first. What is it that I most love to do? 3 easy breaths. That takes about 30 seconds to do, and then come back to the question. So go in a room by yourself where you're not going to be interrupted and do that for 10 minutes. It will change your life. People, even though they're doing it at 9 o'clock in the morning, they may come out and they say, okay, I got my money's worth. Fire up the jet. I'm going back to St. Louis or whatever. And so we have to say, no, you got the rest of the day to perfect all of that. But it doesn't matter if you're the president of a corporation or the head of the local elementary school or whatever. Everybody has a part of us that's special and unique. And it's just like the better the diamond is that you look into, the more facets of it and the more little brilliant points of light that you'll see. And when you get into those big diamonds that cost, several $1,000,000, there's an infinity of fractal that's visible in them. And so human beings are just that way. We've been being designed now and tinkered with for millions and millions of years. And the human brain has been virtually the same for the past 50,000 years. So we've got a product we're liking now. Evolution has got a product that seems to be working pretty well, not always, but at least it can build a bridge and build a skyscraper and the Boston Public Garden and all of that, and has aesthetics and love going. That's a beautiful thing. We need to cherish our evolution as human beings. There's a tendency to focus on the negative element because every day we encounter things that are scary and sad and anger producing. And so we have to embrace those with the same embrace as we embrace everything else. And the big payoff, the interesting thing that happens at the open heartedness of that embrace, you come across that pure consciousness inside and realize, oh, I am one with all human beings. They are me and I am them. And the moment you have that realization, it becomes impossible to really have enemies in the traditional sake, because even your enemies are carrying to you a message that you need to learn to embrace and open up to. And, the Cossacks that were threatening your grandparents, you've got the same Cossacks in your mind today, only they have a more polite appearance, maybe, and they don't thunder around on hoofbeat. But
That's right.
like I said to my grandma, I was going through getting my degree at a time when my grandfather was in the last years of his life, and I sat next to him. He was 92 years old in 1969 or 91, something like that, and we watched the moon landing together. And he was asking me what was I studying in school, and I said, well, right now I have a section on self-esteem and how to deal with self-esteem issues. And I said, how did you deal with self-esteem when you were a kid? And he said, self-esteem. He said, I was, I was this, I'm going to get indelicate here, but that's my granddad. He's a very salty old character. He said, I spent all day looking at the ass end of a mule. I didn't have a chance to think about my self-esteem. And interestingly enough, he got tired of it when he was 16 years old and ran away from home, because he told us later, he said he figured out that if you were a farmer, you either got killed right away, something accident happened to you, or you got crippled or something, or you lived a long time. And he said that either one of those was completely unacceptable to him. And so, as the story goes, he borrowed one of the family mules and lit out for parts unknown, and got waylaid by my grandmother, unfortunately. I don't think he ever made all of his dreams come true, but some of them anyway. He married a declining Southern belle who was mad about that and took it out on him every day of his life. And as my mother put it, they were married 63 years, but 59 and a half of those years, they wouldn't speak to each other. So, but,
Oh, Gay, I'm thinking as you're talking, I think my grandparents were married for 67 years and they had great love. But they're, every great love. I've been with my husband and I've been together 27 years. So less than that, but quite a bit. And I say every great love is full of a lot of talking of all kinds and a lot of silence too. Gay, the last question I want to ask you kind of in closing, if you would what are some, maybe you can share, what are some of your daily practices that help you connect to that pure essence in yourself and not get so caught up in the fears and the stories and the not deservedness?
mhm. Well, I keep myself have for many years focused on my genius zone. I actually practice what I preach. And so
What
I
is your
focus
genius zone, Gay? Actually,
my
before you
genius
tell us
zone.
your practices.
Yes, well, one of the visible aspects of my genius is that in my books is everything I know how to do and everything I do with other people when I'm here, and everything that I've accomplished and everything that I know that will change your life is in the books. And so that's been something important to me, because one of the big goals of my life was to assemble a complete written record where I could pass down everything of value that I learned. And I've done that to my satisfaction. And that brings up one of my other life goals, which is savoring, that I want to savor the moments of my life. I used to drink a lot of coffee. I used to go through like quarts a day. Now I have like 3 half cups, like one at about 6:30 or so whenever I'm up and around, and another one at maybe 9:30 or 10, and another one at maybe 3 o'clock or something like that in the afternoon. But you should see the care I put into them. I send out for special beans to be sent to me twice a month, and I get the best beans I can, and I grind my own beans, and I put every little bit of attention. And also, I make coffee for my wife, and she likes her coffee just so. And I think she'd be the perfect example here, because if I called her in and I say, "How do you like my coffee?" she'd say, that it's the best she's ever tasted. And I've been making her coffee for her for 40 some years now. And just refining it. So that's one of my pleasures, is the savoring aspect of it. So that's probably the first thing I do when I'm walking around in the morning. And I pet my cats. I have two cats. We're long beyond having kids. Our kids are having grandkids, and so um, I'm 79, Katie's 75. So we have two cats. I'm looking at one of them named Allie. She likes to listen to me talk, so she's camped over there listening.
Hi,
And
Allie.
we have Greta, who's in the other room, and so they're British short hairs. If you want to look them up, they're both beautiful girls, and so I have some time with them in the morning. Katie likes to sleep in till 7:38, sometimes 8:30 in the morning, and so those first few hours are just my own stuff. And so make my coffee, I go back, and then after a while, I sometimes take care of email, and then I sit down and I always meditate. I do TM, or a version of TM, an advanced version of TM that I learned over the years, and they they have a really excellent product. It produces that pure consciousness state I'm talking about. They've been at it for 5,000 years. I didn't hear about them till later on in my life, but I had to kind of invent it myself. And then I discovered there was a technique, and so I do TM, and that very easily gets me into that pure consciousness state every day. I learned that in graduate school, by the way. I graduated my PhD in 74, so that would be 50 years ago as we're having this conversation. And so I had learned meditation during my PhD years, which were the busiest years of my life, because I was also a single parent at the time, and my then wife had sort of had a big awakening and decided that that didn't include motherhood and being a wife anymore to a starving graduate student, and so she went to Europe. And she changed her heart later on and came back, but by then I'd kind of moved on. But she resumed her motherhood activities. But I was a single parent there for quite a while, and that was really stressful. I'll tell you, if you're a single parent, my heart goes out to you, because I remember that time being just like, and driving all the time and arranging childcare. So that was the busiest time in my life. And I learned in meditation that I could kind of get out of that for 20 minutes twice a day. And so I did that. And so later on, I went to other meditation retreats. I've been to retreats with Jack Kornfield, who's a great guy, Zen Buddhist, or his form of Buddhism, derived from South Asian type of Buddhism. And I've been to Tibetan Buddhist retreats with famous lamas and things like that. So I would call myself a connoisseur, but I always do my meditation every day, even if I'm not going to retreat. I haven't gone to one of those in many years, but I was one of the first people, by the way, if I may toot my own horn, I was one of the first 12 people to ride my bike across Tibet. We
Is that
got 12,
right?
yeah, in 1986, we got 12
Wow.
mountain bike visas for Tibet. And I was one of a group of 12 people that pedaled our way across Tibet for 3 weeks. And it was a trip of my life, and
I can
changed
imagine.
my whole version of what I thought I could be competent at, So, because I used to be kind of a pear-shaped intellectual, and to gradually construct a new type of body that's physically active and athletic. It's been one of my great challenges.
Well, I hear from you as you're talking, and I love you talking about the savoring moments, which again points to, when we began, you said we're so good at doing, we're not good at being. And we think that more doing will get us what we want. But actually, like, I love you talking about savoring. And my husband makes me coffee every morning. So I love hearing it's such a beautiful little ritual, right? But that moment of savoring, like enjoying that, is part of what helps you be in your zone of genius, right? Along with meditation. Um, any parting words, Gay? Someone listening to this inspired, like, what would you say? Begin here. If someone has said, "Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go within, and I'm ready to tap into the courage to, make my big leap into my zone of genius." What is one simple thing that someone can start doing to kind of get to that, if they're not into TM meditation or haven't had the experience to learn?
The simple instructions are love as much as you can from wherever you are. Begin there. If you're feeling panic right now, love your panic. If you don't know what your zone of genius is, love yourself for not knowing. Giving yourself that open-hearted moment of unconditional love, and then have it grow to 10 seconds and 10 years and a lifetime, and then give it to others. But begin by loving as much as you can from wherever you are. Any of us can do that any time of the day.
That's really, really beautiful. Gay, I am immensely grateful to you for you being here, for your wisdom, for your warmth with which your wisdom comes through, and for your amazing body of work. As I said, there's a few books that I reread often, and yours is one of them. So I'm immensely grateful for you and for being here. Thank you. And for everyone listening and tuning in, I always say this: thank you for being. Thank you for being open. Take something away and actually practice it that you've heard here, that it resonates with you. And if this resonates with you, we're a new podcast. So be a kind, awesome human and rate and review us on your favorite platform, and share this with someone in your life who inspires you to be in your zone of genius. With that, I will see you and be in your ear on our next episode of Reinventability. Thank you.